It all began on a rainy Tuesday morning in Pinebrook, a quiet town just off the interstate, where nothing ever really happened at Dunell it did. Linda May Carter, a soft-spoken woman in her mid-60s, had worked the morning shift at Briar Hill Diner for over 3 decades. She wore her hair in a tidy gray bun, her uniform always neatly pressed, and her smile, well, her smile could warm even the coldest hearts. Every day, like clockwork, she poured coffee, wiped down the counter, and listened to the clinking of forks and the low hum of the old jukebox playing country classics. But that morning, something changed. As she set down a plate of scrambled eggs and rye toast in front of table 5, her eyes drifted to the corner booth. There he was, a quiet little boy, with messy blonde curls and a navy blue hoodie, too big for his frame, same as yesterday, same as the day before. He sat alone, hands in his lap, eyes scanning the room as if waiting for someone. No one ever came. Linda's heart tugged gently, the way it always did when something wasn't right. She walked over slowly, careful not to startle him. "Well, sugar," she said in her gentle southern lilt. "You sure you don't want something to eat today? I make a mean stack of blueberry pancakes." The boy didn't answer, just looked up at her with wide, pale blue eyes. Eyes that looked like they hadn't known sleep in days. Linda glanced around the diner. Empty enough. She lowered herself gently to the booth seat across from him, smoothing her apron. "What's your name, baby? Still silence?" "Al?" The boy clutched his sleeves tighter. Linda bit her lip. Something wasn't right. She was about to find out why. Linda sat across from the boy, watching him carefully, not with suspicion, but with the quiet care of someone who had raised 3 children of her own and buried one. His silence didn't feel like defiance. It felt like fear. Or maybe hunger, the kind that goes deeper than the belly. "Before we continue, please do subscribe to my channel." "I'm Linda," she said softly. "Linda May Carter. Folks around here just call me Miss Linda. You can too." The boy looked at her hand as she offered it across the table, but he didn't take it. Just blinked once, slowly, like a deer. Uncertain whether the stranger in front of it held food or harm. "Tell you what," Linda said, rising with a gentle grunt. "I'll bring you a glass of milk and some toast. You don't have to say nothin'. I'll just leave it here in case you change your mind." She headed back to the counter and told Rosa in the kitchen, "Make it a plate with buttered toast, side of fruit." "Not too much, just a little. You feeding ghosts now?" Rosa teased. Linda smiled. Maybe. By the time she came back to the booth, the boy hadn't moved. But when she set the plate down and walked away, she peeked over her shoulder. His hands were trembling as they reached for the toast, and he took the smallest bite, like someone afraid it might be snatched away. Linda's heart cracked a little. That became the routine. Every morning, same booth, same boy, same silence. By the end of the week, she learned his name, Eli. He whispered it like a secret, barely audible. No last name, no mention of parents. The police had been by, of course. They asked questions, jotted things down in little notebooks, and promised to check it out. But in Pinebrook, with just 2 patrol cars and more potholes than people, not much ever got followed up, and Eli never said more. He would eat quietly, sometimes color with crayons. Linda brought from the dollar store. Once, she even caught the smallest smile on his face when she left a toy dinosaur next to his napkin. But every afternoon, when the lunch crowd trickled in, he'd vanish. Just slip out the door like fog on a hot morning. Then came Monday. Everything changed. Linda arrived early, like always. The clouds hung low and heavy, promising another storm. She brewed the coffee, unlocked the door, and set the salt shakers just so. At 6:47 a.m., she looked up toward the door. No Eli. By 7:15, she was watching the clock. By 8:30, she was pacing by the counter, and by 9 o'clock, she was outside in her cardigan walking the block, scanning doorways and alleys. He never missed a morning. She called the police again. This time she insisted. "That boy's in trouble, and y'all better start taking it seriously." Officer Jennings, a good-hearted but overworked man, finally agreed to file a formal missing persons report. They still didn't know where Eli came from or who he belonged to. Linda didn't go home that night. She made coffee, sat by the window, and waited. 2 days passed. Then 3, no sign of Eli. It was Thursday night when Linda heard the noise. She'd stayed at the diner late, wiping down counters that were already clean, pretending she wasn't. Waiting. But as she stepped outside to lock up, she heard Ida's soft thump near the alley. Behind the dumpster, she froze. Then she heard it again. Cautious, but not afraid, she stepped toward the sound. Her shoes crunched on wet gravel. The air smelled like rain and rust. That's when she saw it. A small shape. Curled against the cold metal of the dumpster, arms wrapped tight around thin knees. Eli. The boy flinched. Linda dropped to her knees. Ignoring the pain in her joints? "Oh, baby, ... What happened?" He didn't speak. When she reached for him, he didn't pull away. She wrapped him in her cardigan and led him inside. His clothes were soaked, and a bruise bloomed across his cheek. Someone had hurt him bad. Linda didn't sleep that night. She made him warm soup and gave him a blanket. And for the first time, she heard him speak more than a whisper. "They found me," he said, voice trembling. "I tried to stay hidden." "Who, baby?" Linda asked gently. "Who found you?" Eli looked up with haunted eyes. "My uncle." "He's not supposed to have me," the court said. "But he took me anyway. He hurts people." Linda's jaw tightened. She'd seen enough. Enough of bruises. Enough of broken systems. Enough of children slipping through the cracks. She called Rosa, then Officer Jennings, and then she called someone she hadn't spoken to in over a year, her daughter. Sherry, a social worker in Tallahassee. "This boy's not going back into that system," Linda said. "Not while I'm still breathing." By morning, the diner felt different, brighter, safer. Linda let Eli help in the kitchen, stirring pancake batter and giggling when flour puffed into the air. For the first time, he looked like a child. Sherry arrived that afternoon, papers in hand. Legal knowledge in her head and fire in her voice. She spoke with officers, filled out emergency protection forms, and made arrangements for foster placement. But Linda knew what she wanted. "I got an extra room," she told Sherry. "Plenty of space. He trusts me." Sherry gave her a long look, then nodded slowly. "You'll have to be approved home visits. Background checks." "I'll pass," Linda said firmly, and she did. Eli never went back to that alley. He never sat alone in the booth again. Instead, he sat beside Linda every morning. A plate of pancakes in front of him and crayons. Scattered across the counter, customers got used to seeing him there. Regulars brought him little gifts. Toy cars, books. One man even offered to teach him chess. He was no longer just the quiet boy. He was Eli and Linda? She was no longer just the waitress. She was his home. The next morning, the diner felt different. The sky outside was a soft blue, the kind of color that made you believe things could turn out all right. But inside Briar Hill Diner, quiet tension lingered like the air just before a thunderstorm. Linda May Carter had barely slept the night before. She'd tossed and turned. The image of that little boy's bruised arms and sunken cheeks burned into her thoughts. She kept replaying the way he looked at her net, just scared, but as if he wanted to believe he was safe with her, but didn't dare trust it. She had seen enough in her lifetime to know. Some kids carry more than just book bags on their shoulders. They carry silence, secrets, shame that doesn't belong to them, Linda. Wiped down the counter for the third time in 10 minutes. Her hands itched to do something. But what? Just then, the bell above the door jingled softly. Her heart skipped. And there he was. Same hoodie. Same backpack. But this time, something new. His lower lip was swollen, faint, but noticeable. And his left eye had the beginning of a faint yellow bruise curling beneath it. Linda's breath caught in her chest. Her hands gripped the edge of the counter. She forced herself to smile gently. No panic, no pressure. "Mornin', sweetheart," she called out, like it was any other day. "Your usual corner's open." The boy nodded slightly and shuffled over to the booth. Same slow steps. Same heavy air around him. Linda poured a glass of orange juice, freshly squeezed. She didn't ask this time. Just brought it over and set it down in front of him, along with a warm biscuit slathered in butter and honey. He looked at it, then at her. Then slowly, carefully. He picked up the biscuit and took a bite. Something broke in Linda's chest. A tiny, invisible weight shifted. "I'm glad you came back," she said softly, easing herself into the seat across from him again. "I was worried," the boy chewed. In silence. Then after a moment, he said, barely above a whisper, "It's not your business." Linda didn't flinch. She nodded. "You're right, sugar, you're right, but sometimes it helps when someone cares, even if they don't have to." He looked away, eyes fixed on the window. Linda followed his gaze and saw a dark SUV parked across the street. Tinted windows. "Engine running? Is that someone you know?" she asked, voice low. He didn't respond. Linda leaned forward. "Just a little. You don't have to tell me anything, not unless you want to. But if you ever need to talk, or if you need help." She paused, choosing her words with the care of a woman who knew too well how fragile some truths were. "Can listen? I can do more too, if you need me to." He blinked. His throat worked like he was trying to swallow a knot. "Are you going to call someone?" he asked finally, still staring out the window. "Only if you want me to," she replied. "Only if you say so." He looked at her again, and for the first time, she saw it not just fear, but conflict. Like he wanted to run and stay all at once. Then, his voice so soft, she had to lean in to hear it, he whispered, "If I tell you something, will you believe me?" Linda nodded slowly. "Every word, baby. You got my word on that." He hesitated. His fingers toyed with the biscuit, breaking off little crumbs. "My name's Jamie," he said finally. "Not the boy." Not kid. Jamie Linda's. Heart swelled with quiet hope. I used to live in Kansas, he continued, still staring at the table with my mom. But she got sick. Then one day this man Camus said he was my uncle. But he's not. Linda's hand tightened slightly, around her coffee mug. He took me, Jamie whispered. He said I had no one else. But he hits me when I talk too much. He says I'm bad. He said if I ever tell anyone, he'll. He trailed off, biting his lip hard. Linda reached across the table, laying her hand over his gently. He won't hurt you anymore, Jamie. Not if I have anything to say about it. He looked up, eyes wide with a mix of fear and desperate hope. Linda exhaled slowly, steadying herself. Do you trust me enough to let me make a call? We can do it together. You won't be alone, not for a second. Jamie didn't answer right. Away. But then her nodded, barely. Just once. It was enough. Linda stood, went behind the counter, and picked up the old rotary phone mounted on the wall. Her hands didn't shake, not even a little. She knew exactly who to call. The kitchen light flickered once as Linda stepped in, apron still on, cheeks still pink from the cold outside. The scent of her roast chicken and rosemary potatoes greeted her like an old friend. But tonight, even comfort food couldn't warm the cold worry lodged in her chest. She sat at her tiny wooden kitchen table, the one Tom had sanded smooth with his own hands back in '78. The clock on the wall ticked softly. A gentle hum of the refrigerator filled the silence as Linda sipped her tea. Eyes unfocused, lost somewhere between the memory of a quiet boy's face and the fear of doing nothing. After all, doing nothing. That's what had caused the trouble. Last time, she couldn't stop thinking about that small bruise near the boy's jawline, or how he wouldn't speak, or how clean to clean he was for a child who claimed to be lost. Something about it all rubbed her heart raw. It didn't sit right. She could feel it in her bones. With a sigh, she stood, reached for the rotary phone by the pantry, dialed a number she hadn't used in years. Pinebrook Sheriff's Office, came a familiar voice. Deputy Carver speaking. Linda hesitated. Ben? There was a pause. Well, I'll be Linda Carter. Hi, sweetheart, she said, voice soft. You still on the job? I am. 22 years this fall. She smiled faintly. Then maybe you can help an old woman sleep a little better tonight. Ben listened quietly as she told him about the boy. She didn't dramatize. Didn't speculate. Just facts. Table 9, no name, no food. No one ever came for him by the time she finished. Ben's voice had taken on the same serious tone she remembered from when he helped her find her dog 10 years ago. All right, he said. I'll stop by tomorrow morning, quietly, just to see. Thank you, Ben. Linda, you still got that soft heart, huh? She chuckled. Not much else left of me, darling. They hung up, and Linda stood in the darkened kitchen for a long while, her hand resting on the phone like it still held warmth. The next morning, frost laced the diner windows in delicate spiderwebs. Linda arrived an hour early, setting out the creamer, flipping on the lights, wiping the counter, even though it was already clean. At 7:05 sharp, the door jingled. Not the boy, Ben. He looked the same, just grayer, a little rounder in the middle, and a little slower on the draw. He nodded at her and took a seat at the far end of the counter, pulling his cap low. Coffee? She offered, already pouring. He smiled. Always. By 7:40, Linda had nearly convinced herself the boy wouldn't come. But then, there he was. Hood up. Same sneakers, same silence. He slid into the booth like a ghost sliding into memory. Ben didn't move, just sipped his coffee, eyes hidden. Linda approached, slower than usual. Mornin', baby, she said softly. The boy didn't respond. I brought you something, she added, placing a small plate in front of him. Toast with cinnamon sugar. Lightly buttered. Still no response, but he looked at her. Then slowly, ever so slowly, reached for a corner of toast and tore off a small piece. Linda's heart swelled. She turned and walked back to the counter, passing Ben, who gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod. 10 minutes passed. Then 15, finally. Ben stood, walked slowly to the booth and crouched beside it. His voice, when he spoke, was low and kind. Hey there, buddy. My name's Ben. I work with the sheriff's office here in town. You mind if I sit with you a moment? The boy's posture stiffened. He glanced at Linda, who gave him a slow nod. You're not in trouble, Ben continued gently. I just want to make sure you're safe. The boy blinked, lips parting slightly. My name's Oliver, he whispered. Oliver Tate. Ben's hand froze. Tate. The boy nodded. My dad said not to talk to anyone, but I got hungry. Linda's knees felt weak. She gripped the counter for balance. Ben's voice softened even further. Is your dad nearby, Oliver? Oliver shook his head. He left me in the car, but he didn't come back. When 3 days ago, silence fell like a stone. Ben stood slowly, walked to the counter, and whispered, "I'm calling CPS and backup. Something's wrong here." Linda didn't respond. She just looked at the bueno, at Olivia, and felt her heart ache deeper than it ever had before. That afternoon, the diner buzzed in quiet tension. Officers came and went in plain clothes. A social worker sat beside Oliver, speaking to him in soft tones. Ben pulled Linda aside near the register. "There's no record of an Oliver Tate living in state, but we ran a match through the national system. He's on a missing persons list from Colorado. Went missing 2 weeks ago. There's an alert out." Linda's mouth went dry. Colorado. What would he be doing here? Ben exhaled slowly.
That's...
"What we're trying to figure out is father. Well, let's just say he's got a history. I think he might have crossed state lines to avoid arrest." Linda felt like she couldn't breathe. "Is Oliver safe now?" she asked. "He is. 'Cause of you." She didn't respond right away. Just looked toward the booth where Oliver now sat, coloring quietly with a pencil someone had given him. "I'll be closing up early today," she said finally. Ben nodded. "You take your time." That evening, Linda stood once more in her kitchen, tea cooling beside her, staring out the window as the first flakes of snow began to fall. She thought about how the world could break your heart 1,000 ways, but sometimes it handed you a piece to hold on to. A small, fragile piece, like a boy with pale blue eyes and 2 big shoes. And somehow, that was enough to keep her going. Linda May Carter stood in the kitchen of her small, creaky house, still, wearing her Briar Hill Diner uniform. The TV in the living room was tuned to the local news, but the sound was off. The only noises were the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the distant patter of rain against the windows. In her hands, she cradled a mug of chamomile tea, fingers slightly trembling. It had been 3 days since she brought the boy into her home. 3 days of whispered conversations, cautious questions, and unanswered mysteries. It, the boy, hadn't once asked to leave, not even hinted at it. That alone haunted her. Eli now sat curled on the worn floral sofa, knees to his chest, watching the silent TV with wide, anxious eyes. The faint flicker of light danced across his pale face, making him look even more fragile than he already was. Linda gently set the tea down on the coffee table and sat beside him. "You ever want to talk?" "I'm right here," she said softly, like she was offering him a lifeline and not a question. Eli looked at her with that same quiet stare. But this time, his lips parted. "My dad said, if I ever talked about it, bad things would happen," he whispered. Linda blinked. "Talked about what, sweetheart?" He hesitated, then lowered his gaze. Linda reached over and touched his shoulder. "Gently. Ain't no one gonna hurt you here, I promise. I got locks on all the doors, a dog that barks louder than thunder, and a frying pan that's seen more battles than a war vet." A flicker of a smile passed over Eli's face, and that tiny gesture broke something open in her heart. Then he said, almost too soft to hear, "He told me I wasn't supposed to exist." Linda froze. "Who told you that, baby?" Eli didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into the oversized hoodie pocket and pulled out a small, crumpled photograph. He handed it to her. Linda unfolded it carefully. The image was faded, water-damaged, but she could make out a younger version of Ella, maybe 5 or 6, standing between 2 adults in front of a large black SUV. The man had a cold expression, wearing a suit and tie. The woman tall, blonde, and elegant, sunglasses on, and a fake smile that didn't touch her eyes. "That's them," Eli said, "but they're not my parents." Linda looked at him sharply. "What do you mean they're not? They're the ones who raised me." But I heard them arguing. They said I was it's a mistake, that I was supposed to be sent back after the trial ended. "Trial?" Linda echoed. Mind was racing. It was racing. Eli nodded. "I was part of something. Don't know what exactly, but there were doctors, labs, and always cameras. Then one day, they just stopped talking about the project. But they didn't stop watching me." Linda leaned back, the photograph still in her hand. This was no ordinary runaway. This was a child caught in something far bigger. She turned to him. "Eli, have you ever seen your real parents? Do you remember them?" He looked away, only in dreams. Then, as if triggered by the word itself, he shot upright and gasped. Linda jumped. "What is it?" Eli pointed to the TV, now showing a still image from a news report. The sound was still off, but the headline across the screen read, "Missing Child Case Reopened After Anonymous Tip Pine Brook Police Investigate Strange Lead-In." The center of the image was a woman. She was crying in front of a podium, holding a photo. Eli whispered, "That's her." Linda turned the volume up. The woman's voice cracked through the speakers. "If anyone has seen my son, Eli Granger, please come forward. It's been 8 years. I just want my baby home." Linda's breath caught. This was it. The moment the fog lifted, the mystery began to crack open. The boy she'd taken in wasn't just a runaway. He was a stolen child. Taken, hidden, and maybe ... experimented on. Eli, she said carefully, do you remember the name Granger? He frowned. I've heard it once. A long time ago. One of the doctors called me that before he got fired. Linda's mind reeled. The Grangers were a well-known family. Old money. Political ties. There had been whispers years ago of a child who vanished from their estate during a charity gala. No ransom, no trace. Just a quiet police investigation. That eventually went cold, until now. Suddenly, headlights swept across her front window. Linda stood quickly, heart pounding. She stepped to the curtain and peeked out. A sleek, black SUV sat idling in the street. Her heart dropped. They'd found him. The sun filtered through the blinds in golden slats as Linda stood by the booth, heart pounding, her fingers gripping the edge of the laminated table. The hush that had fallen over the diner lingered, like the moment just before a summer storm breaks loose. Across from her, the boy Lucas sat motionless. His plate of eggs and toast remained untouched, and his small hand clenched a crumpled napkin.
Ow.
Linda didn't press. She just sat again, slowly, her knees cracking gently as she lowered herself into the seat. I'm not going to ask anything you don't want to tell me, she said softly, her voice a warm hush in the morning quiet. If there's something you need, baby, I'm right here. Lucas looked down, and for the first time, his voice came small, hoarse. In barely a whisper, he said not to talk to anyone. Linda's breath caught. Who said that, sweetheart? The boy swallowed hard. My dad, but he's not really my dad. Linda leaned in, heart fluttering like the old paper napkins in the dispenser when the front door opened. But this time, no customers came in. Lucas looked out the window. He took me after the fire. I don't think he was supposed to. Linda's eyes widened. She remembered now. A house fire. Just 2 months ago. On the far edge of Pine Brook, a family of 3 childs unaccounted for. The news reports had quieted after a few days. No leads, no suspects. The town had moved on, but Linda hadn't. She reached out gently, her hand hovering over Lucas's baby. I think you just told me something mighty important. The boy's lip trembled. He said if I talk, he'll take me somewhere worse. Somewhere cold, where there's no windows. Linda's throat tightened. The boy wasn't just scared, he was terrified, conditioned. You're safe here, she whispered. He don't know you're here today, does he? Lucas shook his head. He's working. He always works Thursdays. Linda's heart squeezed again. It was Thursday. That gave her a little time. Not much, but enough. She looked around the diner. Still quiet. Still early. Her coworker Rita was in the back prepping soup stock. The grill sizzled low, and the phone on the counter sat within reach. Okay, she said gently. You sit tight, all right? I'm just going to get you a fresh glass of juice. She rose slowly, careful not to make it feel like anything other than kindness. But inside, her pulse was racing. Behind the counter, she dialed. What? Not 911. She needed someone. Who wouldn't spook the boy? Sheriff Dalton, please. It's Linda from Briar Hill Diner. Yes, now, please, hurry and come quiet. She turned back, keeping her face soft. Lucas still sat where she'd left him, feet not even reaching the floor. The sleeves of his hoodie pulled over his hands. He looked so small, so fragile. But there was something else in his eyes now, something that hadn't been there yesterday, Hope. Linda brought the juice over and smiled like everything was normal. Here you go, baby. Extra ice. Just how you like it. Lucas looked up. Thank you, Miss Linda. Her heart cracked at that. You're welcome, honey. 10 minutes passed. Then, 15. A few more customers trickled in misses. Gentry from the bookstore and her husband, Carl. Linda moved around the diner like always, refilling mugs, offering smiles.
Us?
All while watching the door. Then it opened again. And there, in plainclothes and a worn baseball cap, was Sheriff Dalton. He nodded once. Subtle Linda walked by him casually, leaning in like he was just any other regular. Back corner, she whispered. His name's Lucas. Says the man he's with isn't really his daddy. Dalton's face changed.
Not muckbet.
Linda had known him since he was knee-high to a grasshopper. She could read him like a Sunday newspaper. He walked toward the booth with the slow, steady stride of a man who knew how to make people feel safe. Hey there, he said kindly. Mind if I sit a minute? Lucas looked at Linda, then nodded, and as the sheriff slid into the booth, the quietest storm Pine Brook had ever known finally started to break. Linda stepped back, hand over her chest, breathing deep. She had done it. She'd listened. She hadn't turned away. The next morning, the diner smelled of cinnamon and brewing coffee, the kind of warmth that wrapped around you like a favorite blanket. Linda had arrived early, earlier than usual, needing. The quiet before the questions started again. She poured herself a cup of coffee and sat at the counter, staring out the window where the fog clung to the glass like the memory of yesterday. The bell above the door jingled. Too soon for customers, Sheriff. Dunley stepped in, removing his hat with a nod. He looked tired, older somehow. Linda, he said, voice low. Got a moment? She stood and motioned him to a booth in the back. Sit down. I'll bring you something warm. No, he shook his head gently. No appetite today. She placed a cup of coffee before him anyway, her hands slightly trembling. Did you find anything? She asked. He leaned in. His name's Owen. Full name, Owen Prescott. Livasaur lived out in the Black Hollow trailer park. His mom's missing. Been gone maybe a week, maybe longer. Linda's breath hitched. And his father, Dunley's eyes darkened. Dead. Years ago. Car accident. Mom raised him alone since. He was 3. Neighbors say she was quiet. Worked double shifts, no trouble. But lately, ... things were off. Off how? Bruises on her arms. Someone saw her arguing with a man at night. Not Owen's dad. Not a relative. Possibly someone she was seeing. Linda rubbed her arm absently. Do you think he hurt her? We're not ruling anything out, Dunley said, his voice heavy. But Owen's not talking. Hasn't spoken a word to anyone. Not social services. Not me. Nothing. He spoke to me, Linda whispered. Dunley's brows rose. Not much. But he did, she said, her voice quivering. Called me Miss... Linda had asked me not to tell anyone he was hungry. The sheriff nodded. You got through to him. That matters. Linda hesitated. Let him stay with me, just for now, till you figure this out. Linda, I've raised 3 kids and 2 grandbabies. I know how to care for a child, she said, eyes fierce. He trusts me. That's more than anyone else has. Dunley studied her for a long moment. All right, but just for now. I'll talk to the county. Get a temporary release arranged. Paperwork will take a day or 2. Linda exhaled, something soft and grateful moving through her chest. Thank you, Jim, stood tipping his hat. Keep him close. Don't let him out of your sight. As the sheriff left, the bell jingled once more. Owen. Same hoodie, same quiet steps. But today, he looked straight at her, eyes searching, wary but not scared. Linda knelt down to his level. Good morning, sugar, you hungry? He nodded slowly. She reached out a hand. Come sit with me. We'll have pancakes and talk, all right? Placed his tiny fingers in hers. And for the first time, she felt the faintest squeeze. They sat in the booth, the one near the window. And she brought over a plate of chocolate chip pancakes and a glass of milk. He picked up the fork and slowly took a bite. She smiled gently. Owen, I know it's hard, but I want to help you. You don't have to say anything right now. Just know that you're safe here. He looked up, a smear of syrup on his cheek. His ice toast tired, ocean-colored, eyes shelled something between sorrow and hope. Is my mom gone? He whispered. Linda stilled. I don't know yet, sweetheart, she said softly. But people are looking. You're not alone anymore. He looked down. Fork paused midair. She told me, ... If anything ever happened, I should find someone kind. Linda blinked back tears. She told me to find someone who made good pancakes, he added, voice trembling. Linda laughed gently, reaching across the table to brush back his curls. Well, sounds like she raised a smart boy, and I do make a mean pancake, don't I? He smiled, the first real smile she'd seen. The day passed in quiet moments, him helping her wipe down tables, counting napkins, drawing on placemats. He didn't speak again that day, but Linda didn't push. That night, ate up the guest room in her small cottage just outside of town. The walls were pale blue, the bedding flannel and warm. Your room now, she told him. Got a nightlight and everything? He looked around the room like it was something from a dream. Linda handed him a little stuffed bear she'd kept from when her granddaughter used to visit. This is Rufus, she said. He's a good listener. If you get scared at night, squeeze his paw. Owen took it gently, cradling it to his chest. She tucked him in, smoothing his hair. I'll be right. Down the hall, all right? Door open if you need me? He looked up, a small voice barely audible. Will you stay? Just until I fall asleep. Linda nodded, easing into the rocker in the corner. Of course, sweetheart, I'm right here. As the wind whispered through the trees outside and the world darkened to deep velvet blue, Linda hummed a lullaby her mother once sang to her. Soft, old, full of warmth and ache. Owen's eyes fluttered. He didn't say another word, but she saw it in the way his body relaxed, how he curled into the blankets and finally-finaled himself sleep, for the first time in maybe weeks. Linda stayed there long after, watching over him like a guardian angel in the quiet dark, the glow of the nightlight casting gentle shadows on the wall. Outside, unseen to them both, a car slowly crept past the house. Its lights were off, and the driver was watching Linda. May Carter sat motionless at her kitchen table that evening. the dim light above casting a golden hue over the folded napkin in her hands. It was the one the boy had used that morning, still faintly marked with syrup and something else, something she couldn't quite place. Maybe it was worry. Maybe it was a trace of sadness soaked into the fabric. The house was quiet now. Cat Marbles lay curled up on the windowsill, and the television mumbled low in the other room, forgotten. But her thoughts were loud. Why would a child keep showing up alone, barely eating, and never speaking? And why had no one come looking? For him, she sipped her tea and looked out the window into the night. The streets of Pine Brook were still. But the silence wasn't comforting this time. It was haunting. The next morning at Briar Hill Diner, Linda arrived early, too early. The sky was still smudged with charcoal clouds, and the birds hadn't yet begun their usual chorus. She wiped the counter, reorganized the sugar jars, even replaced the cracked napkin holder on table 7. But mostly, she'd watched the door. At exactly 7:11 a.m., it opened. The small brass bell jingled like a soft alarm. He was back, the boy still. In that same oversized navy hoodie, walked straight to the corner booth. No hesitation, no glance around. Linda met him there, her apron still damp from fresh sink water. "Morning, sweetheart," she said softly. "Want something warm today? I've got fresh oatmeal with brown sugar, or my homemade apple muffins." He didn't look up. But after a pause, he nodded. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. She brought the food herself. No waitress tray this time, just a careful, warm plate and a folded towel under her arm. "You know," she began gently, sitting across from him again, "you remind me of someone I used to know." She wasn't lying. When her younger brother, Johnny, was 10, he would disappear from the house for Horsometimes days after there. Father lost his temper. Johnny was quiet, kind, and carried a sadness in his eyes no child should have had too. "You don't have to say anything," she added, "but I want you to know you were safe here, okay? Always." The boy glanced up. Not fully just a flick of his pale blue eyes, but it was enough. Linda smiled through the lump rising in her throat. That's when it happened. A black SUV pulled into the parking lot. It was polished, shiny, and far too expensive for this side of town. Linda narrowed her eyes through the window as 4 men stepped out. Suits, sunglasses, earpieces. They weren't from around here. She turned quickly to the boy. He had frozen fork halfway to his mouth. His lips were slightly parted, and his small shoulders trembled under the hoodie. Linda's instincts surged like wildfire. The men entered the diner, eyes scanning. Not for food. Not for a waitress. For him. "Morning, fellas," Linda said cheerfully, stepping directly into their path. "We're not quite open yet, but I could fix you up something quick if you're in a rush." One of them, tall and angular, pulled out a wallet nut to pivot to flash something silver. But it carried weight. "We're looking for someone," he said. "Just a boy." Linda's voice didn't shake. "Well, unless he's hiding in the syrup bottles, I don't see no boys without a grown-up. Sorry." The man's jaw tightened. His eyes moved past her toward the corner booth. Too late, the boy was gone. Only the hoodie remained. Crumpled on the seat like a deflated balloon. The back door swayed slightly in the kitchen beyond, still letting in a slice of wind. Linda turned back to the men. "Looks like someone's already left, but you're welcome to try the eggs. They're famous." The tension was thick. One of the men made a move toward the back. Linda blocked him. "You're not law, and you're not welcome back there." Tallest one gave her a long, unreadable look, then turned. "Let's go." Within minutes, the SUV was gone. The diner felt normal again. But it wasn't. Linda closed early that day. Something bigger than her small-town diner was unraveling. She wasn't sure if she was ready to pull the thread, but that evening, just as she placed her keys on the hallway hook and untied her apron, a soft knock came at her back door. She opened it to find the boy met on his knees, a scratch on his cheekbone. His eyes finally met hers. And for the first time, he spoke. "They're not my family," he whispered. Linda knelt slowly. "Then who are they, sweetheart?" He swallowed hard. "I don't know, but I think they're following me because of what I saw." The wind blew gently behind him, rustling the hedges. Linda reached out and held his hand. "Come inside, baby. We'll figure this out together." And as the boy stepped over the threshold, the lights in the street flickered once, just once. But Linda noticed. And so did someone else watching from a black sedan parked across the street. The paper in the glove compartment the sun had long dipped. Behind the Pine Brook Hills, by the time Linda May Carter parked her dusty Ford just outside the worn wire gate of an old trailer park nestled in the woods. She could still hear Daniel's voice in her head, that soft, apologetic whisper as he sat beside her in the diner's kitchen hours earlier. "I think someone's following me." Those 5 words had burrowed deep into her heart. Not because of the fear behind them, but Because of the resigned way he said them, as if being chased was just a part of life? Linda sat in the driver's seat for a moment longer, gathering her thoughts. Her fingers rested on the steering wheel, knuckles pale. She looked over at Daniel, who had fallen asleep curled in the passenger seat. One of her wool blankets was tucked over him like a cocoon, and in sleep, his expression finally realized. A child should look innocent, free, but Linda knew better. Children like Daniel didn't get to rest for long. The trailer park hadn't changed in 20 years. Some rusted signs. The same smell of burnt motor oil and pine. It was half abandoned now. 3 trailers stood in working condition. The others were left to rot. This wasn't the kind of place a child should be raised. And yet here they were. With one final exhale, she stepped out of the truck. The cold bit her cheeks, and gravel crunched beneath her boots as she walked toward the trailer. Daniel had once pointed out in passing. "That's where he brought me once," he had said, his voice distant. Before he disappeared, Linda approached the crooked trailer steps, heart pounding, and knocked. No answer. She knocked again, louder nothing. But as she turned to leave, she spotted movement through the broken blinds, a shadow shifting quickly inside. "Hello?" she called. "I'm not here to cause trouble. Just have questions about a boy, Daniel." Silence then. Slowly the door creaked open. A woman stood in the frame, thin and frail, wrapped in a cigarette haze. Her eyes were sunken, her cheeks hollow. "Who wants to know?" she rasped. Linda steadied herself. "I'm Linda Carter. I work at Briar Hill Diner. The boy came to mess aid. He used to be here with a man named Paul." The woman finished for her, her voice suddenly shaking. "That bastard." Linda's brows furrowed. "So you knew him?" The woman nodded, then stepped aside. "You better come in." Inside, the trailer was dim, lit only by a flickering lamp and the red glow of a cigarette burning in an ashtray. The woman introduced herself as Sharon May. Paul's ex-girlfriend. How she said the word ex like it carried poison. "Paul came here last year with the kid," Sharon muttered, pouring a splash of whiskey into a chipped coffee mug. "Said he was his nephew or something. Didn't stay long, couple days tops. Then he vanished." "Did you notice anything strange?" Linda asked. Sharon laughed bitterly. Everything about Paul was strange. She gestured to a worn leather satchel near the door. "He left that behind when he took off. I was going to toss it, but something told me to hold on to it." Linda knelt down and unbuckled the flap. Inside were mostly useless things. A pocket knife, an old cell phone with no SIM card, a photo of a man and a baby at the beach butt near the bottom. Folded neatly like a secret was a paper that caught her breath. It was a receipt dated 6 weeks ago. From a motel in Michigan. The name signed on the line was Benjamin Voss. Benjamin Voss. Linda stared at it, confused. "Do you know who that is?" Sharon shook her head. "Nope. That ain't Paul's name, I'll tell you that." Linda folded the receipt and slid it into her pocket. It was the first real lead in days, she thanked. Sharon promised to be in touch and stepped back into the night air. Back at the truck, Daniel had woken and was rubbing his eyes. "You okay, sweetheart?" she asked softly. He nodded. "Just had a weird dream." Linda helped him buckle up and handed him a piece of licorice from her glove box, trying to keep things light. But as she started the engine, her thoughts churned. Benjamin Voss. She didn't know who he was, but she'd find out. The next morning, she paid a visit to Officer Riley Pinebrook's only remaining cop with a working computer and enough curiosity to still give a damn. "Benjamin Voss," he repeated, typing the name into his system. "Yeah, that came up a few months back. There was an Amber Alert out of Indiana that briefly mentioned that aliasome kind of smuggling case. Went quiet after the suspect vanished." "You think it's related?" "I think it's time someone asked," Linda replied. She left the station with more questions than answers, but her next step was clear. Michigan. Back at the diner that evening, Linda poured Daniel a warm mug of cocoa and told him gently, "We're going on a little trip, you and me. Just for a few days." He looked up at her uncertain. "Will I be safe?" he whispered. Linda touched his hand. "With me? Always." Linda stayed low on her knees, glancing around the dim room with a mother's worry. The carpet beneath the kids was stained and threadbare. The wallpaper bubbled and yellowed, as if the house had been forgotten, left to rot from the inside out. Her eyes settled on the 3 children in front of her. They weren't watching the static. They were lost inside it, like it held secrets only they understood. David stood beside her, still clinging to her hand. His little knuckles were white. "Can you tell me your names?" Linda asked softly. The girl with pigtails didn't answer right away, but her eyes flicked over to David, then back to Linda. "I'm Marlene," she said finally. "That's Theo." She pointed at the thin boy, with a scratch on his cheek. She nodded toward a smaller boy curled up with a worn blanket, sucking his thumb. "Where's the grown-up here?" Linda asked. "Is someone watching over you?" They come when the sun's gone, Marlene said. Only then. They don't. Like noise. Linda looked at David, brows drawn tight. You mean ... the foster parents? But Marlene shook her head slowly. You're not like you. Just then, the hallway light flickered and dimmed. Junebug whimpered and Theo flinched. Like a trained animal, Marlene froze. David whispered, they're coming. Linda stood up, heart hammering. Who's coming? But no one answered suddenly. A loud knock echoed down the hallway, 3 slow, deliberate bangs. Linda stepped in front of the children instinctively. Get behind me, she said, voice steady. The knock came again. Marlene's voice was barely audible. They knocked 3 times. Always. Linda turned toward the door and saw a tall shadow pass just beyond it. She reached into her purse for her phone dead. She cursed under her breath. I don't know what kind of place this is. She said, voice trembling, but I'm getting you all out. No, David whispered. If you leave now, they'll follow. Who? Linda asked, her voice cracking. David, you have to tell me. But the boy wouldn't look at her. The air was heavier now, pressing in. Linda walked toward the door slowly, pausing to peek through the crack. Nothing, just the hallway. Then, out of the silence, a raspy voice whispered from the other side. Don't feed them. Linda stepped back, chilled to the bone. She turned to look at the sandwich she'd left on the table. Gone. The wax paper lay empty. The kids hadn't eaten it. Something else. Junebug whimpered again and began to cry. Marlene scooted over and covered his ears. Linda's instincts screamed to get out, but she couldn't leave them behind. She knelt again beside David. What do you mean they'll follow? Who are they? David finally looked up at her, his dark eyes hollow with something deeper than fear. They come for the kids no one wants. The ones people forget. Linda's stomach dropped. And the foster system ... lets this happen. One remembers, Marlene said. Every kid who disappears from here, no one comes looking. Theo finally spoke, his voice soft and distant. The house erases them. Creak echoed through the floorboards overhead. They're upstairs, Marlene whispered. They move when you talk about them. Linda's eyes darted up to the ceiling. A slow scraping noise trailed across the floor above them, as if something heavy was being dragged. She stood quickly, crossing the room and locking the door. Then she looked at the kids. I'm getting you out. I don't care what's out there. Sniffled. You'll make it worse. That's what they said the last time. Linda crouched in front of him. Last time. The woman who came last winter, Marlene said. She brought soup. She tried to help us, and they made her forget, David whispered. They whispered in her ear until she didn't remember her own name. She walked right out and never came back. Linda's throat tightened. Her knees trembled. She turned toward the window. It was boarded up from the outside. She tried to open. It nothing. Nailed shut, she spun back. Toward the kids, panic rising. We need a way out. Another door, a back exit. Anything. Theo stood up, quiet as a cat, pointed toward the closet. It goes to the crawl space. That's how they come in. Linda walked to the closet door, yanked it open. The stench hit her first earthy wet like a tomb. Wooden boards led downward into a tight black passage. I'll go first, she said. One by one. Hold hands. The kids didn't move at first, but then David stepped forward and gripped her sleeve. We'll go, he said. But don't let go, no matter what you hear. Linda nodded and began the descent. The air grew colder with every step. Behind her, small feet followed. The boards creaked. Somewhere deeper inside the passage, she thought she heard breathing. They crawled slowly through the narrow tunnel. Walls pressed in, damp and close. Linda felt cobwebs brush her cheeks. Something skittered across her hand, but she didn't stop. David was right behind her, and Theo, then Marlene, and Junebug. The tunnel curved downward, then upward again. After what felt like 100 yards, Linda spotted faint moonlight bleeding in from ahead. She pushed forward and reached a small wooden door. It opened with a creak into the overgrown backyard. Freedom, the kids tumbled out behind her, blinking. Under the moonlight, the night air was cool, clean, the stars bright. Linda turned to count them. David, Marlene, Theo, ... Her heart stopped. Where was Junebug? Junebug. Where was Junebug? She spun back toward the tunnel, but the door slammed shut. Junebug, she screamed, pounding on the door. No, Theo said quietly. They never let all of us go. Linda hit the door again. You have to get him as... Just a baby. David put a hand on her arm. If we go back, they'll take all of us. Tears welled in her eyes. But then the porch light of the house flickered on. The front door opened. A tall man in a caretaker's uniform stepped out. Looking around lazily, he didn't seem to see them. Linda backed up, ushering the children into the tree line behind the house. We're going to the sheriff, she said through gritted teeth. No, David said. I'll make them remember, Linda growled. The children stayed close as she led them toward the road beyond the woods, never once looking back. But as they passed the first tree line, Marlene stopped. She looked up at Linda. You remember? Our names, right? Linda blinked. What? Our names, Marlene repeated, eyes wide. Say them. Linda opened her mouth and froze. David, Theo, Marlene, ... and then, the last Namagon, a hole in her memory. Single missing piece. She tried again, heart pounding. But the name wouldn't come. Behind them, the house exhaled, a deep groan through. The trees, the woods fell quiet, and Junebug was forgotten. The next morning in Pinebrook was wrapped in fog. Linda sat on her porch swing with her second cup of coffee, the steam rising slowly, as if even it wasn't ready to face the day. She hadn't slept. After returning from the foster home, she'd stayed up rereading the county documents she'd found years ago during her brief stint as a volunteer guardian ad litem. Back then, the system had felt like a pit she couldn't climb out of. Now it felt like a war she couldn't afford not to fight. Her phone vibrated in her robe pocket. Unknown number? She hesitated, then answered. Linda May Carter, a Maine's voice asked. Firm, controlled. Yes, speaking. This is Agent Miles Rourke, from Child Protective Services. I believe you visited the old Carrick house on Elm Street last night. It's a state-licensed foster residence. Linda's hand gripped the phone tighter. Yes, I did. I brought dinner for a boy named David who's been coming into my diner. Is that a problem, Agent? There was a pause. We'd like you to come down to our local field office and speak with us. This afternoon. I can do that, Linda, said her voice steely. Bring any documentation you may have. She hung up, staring out over her untrimmed lawn. What she felt wasn't fear. It was determination. At precisely 2 p.m. Linda sat in a windowless office with faded walls and buzzing fluorescent lights. Agent Rourke sat across from Hurdle, square-jawed. Maybe mid-40s with a worn folder open in front of him. Beside him was a younger woman with a legal pad who hadn't spoken a word yet, Miss Carter. Can you walk us through what you saw last night at the Carrick home? Rourke asked. Linda did. She told them about the static-filled TV, the gaunt children, the air of silent fear, and how no staff seemed to be present at the time. She described the hollow-cheeked girl in her warning. The way David clung to her hand. When she finished, the young woman scribbled something quickly. Miss Carter, Rourke said after a pause. Do you know the name of the child you've been caring for? David, she said. He never told me a last name. Rourke pushed the folder forward, revealing a photograph. It was David's same solemn eyes, same mop of dark hair. His name is David Holloway, Rourke said. He was placed at Carrick under emergency orders after his grandmother's sudden death. No other known relatives. Linda's heart ached. What about his parents? Deceased. A car accident. When he was 4, her voice caught. Now, he said he saw them in his dreams. Said he thinks they're trying to tell him something. Rourke and the assistant exchanged a look. What? Linda asked sharply. We've received multiple complaints. Over the past year regarding Carrick, Rourke said slowly. Allegations of neglect. Possible misappropriation of state funds. But so far, nothing's stuck. No direct evidence. Linda leaned forward. What if you had it? Evidence, I mean. What if someone was willing to go back in? He stared at her. That would be extremely dangerous, Miss Carter. If what you're saying is true, whoever's running that home could retaliate. It's not just neglect. It might be abuse, or worse. I'm not afraid of them, she said, her voice steady. I'm afraid of what happens if I do nothing. That evening, Linda returned to the diner under the guise of cleaning up. Truthfully, she needed a quiet place to think, to plan. She was restocking condiments when the bell above the door jinged lead. It was the little girl from Carrick, the one with the pigtails. She stood alone, her dress too thin for the cool air, socks mismatched. In her hand, she held a folded note. Linda rushed over. Sweetheart, are you okay? Did someone send you? No. The girl said nothing, only handed over the note and turned to leave. Wait, what's your name? She turned back briefly. Rosie. Then. She was gone. Linda opened the note. It was hastily scribbled, letters crooked and cramped. They watch us. Cameras and the lights. Food makes us sick. At night, they take one kid and lock them downstairs. We don't know what happens, but they come back different. Please help us. Don't tell anyone. Beneath it were 4 names. David, Rosie, Malik. And Hannah Linda stood frozen, the paper trembling in her hand. This wasn't just neglect. This was something darker, systematic, deliberate. The next night, she drove back to Carrick Boot. This time she wasn't alone. Agent Rourke sat beside her in a nondescript sedan, wearing civilian clothes and carrying a small briefcase. Inside were a camera, audio recorder, and a document she had yet to read. The plan was simple. Linda would enter the home again with food under the pretense of visiting David. But this time, she'd wear a hidden microphone and plant a small camera in the children's room. The house looked even worse in the dark. The porch light flickered, and the curtains remained tightly drawn as Linda approached the door. Rourke's voice crackled in her earpiece. "We're rolling." She knocked. A tall man with stringy gray hair and a loose tie opened the door. His eyes were glassy. "Can I help you?" "I'm Linda," she said brightly. "Brought some supper for the kids. Thought I'd check in on David, make sure he's eating okay." He hesitated. "Won't be but a minute." He grunted and stepped aside. Inside, the house felt like a trap. The children weren't in the living room. Static-filled TV was gone. In its place sat a locked cabinet. She noticed a camera in the upper corner of the room. Just as Rosie's note had warned, she carried the food into the back, peering around. The bedroom door was slightly ajar. She stepped in. David sat cross-legged. On the floor, Rosie and Malik sat beside him, whispering. When they saw Linda, they jumped to their feet, wide-eyed. She gave them a quick nod, then pretended to reach into her pocket, planting the small camera beneath the dresser with a slight motion of her hand. She leaned in close and whispered, "Tonight's the last time anyone hurts you, okay? Just hang on." David nodded, eyes shining. Linda turned to leave. The door slammed behind her. The stringy-haired man stood there, expression blank. "I think it's time you left, ma'am." "You left, ma'am." Linda froze. From the corner, Rosie let out a small gasp. And suddenly, Linda realized she wasn't just here to gather evidence. She might be here to save them all or not come out at all. The wind outside. Pinebrook twisted around the corners of the foster home like a warning, hissing through the trees and rattling the old shingles. Linda May Carter sat on the wooden bench just beyond the porch, her eyes unfocused as she watched the sky begin to gray. Inside, the silence was no longer. Hollowit was waiting. Something had shifted. David was inside, along with the other children. For the first time in days, Linda had left him alone with Ms. Ellie and the volunteer social worker. Maya, not because she trusted them completely, but because David had asked. He said he needs to tell them something, Ellie had said with worry in her voice, standing at the doorway, alone. Linda had hesitated, her hands tightening around her purse strap. But David had nodded, and the look in his eye steady, old, and resolute told her it wasn't a request. It was something he needed to do. So now she waited. And with every creak of the wind and every rustle from the woods, her anxiety grew. Just as she was about to stand, the front door creaked open behind her. She turned to see Maya step out, her expression tight. "Miss Carter," she said, her voice low, "you should come inside." Linda didn't ask questions. She stood, her knees stiff, and followed her through the narrow hallway. Inside the living room, the atmosphere had changed. The kids weren't sprawled in front of the static-filled TV anymore. They were gathered around David, who stood in the middle of the rug like a little preacher. "They said you should hear it too," Maya whispered. Linda stepped in quietly. David looked at her, then at the rest. "Remember the man in the black coat?" he asked the other children. "Told me not to tell, but I think we have to." The other children nodded silently. The girl with the pigtails was clutching a frayed teddy bear, her knuckles white. "What man?" Maya asked carefully. "Who is he?" David hesitated. Then said, "He said he used to come here, before Ellie was in charge. When Ms. Gretchen ran the house." Linda exchanged a sharp glance with Ellie, whose face had gone pale. "Ms. Gretchen?" Maya echoed. "Wasn't she? She passed away?" 5 years ago, Ellie whispered. "Heart attack. I took over after that." David stepped forward. Said Ms. Gretchen let him take kids sometimes, when they were too noisy. Or asked too many questions. "No," Ellie breathed. "No. That's not true. That can't be true." David turned to the others. "Tell them." The girl with pigtails spoke up. "I saw him once. Came in through the back. Real quiet. Said he was looking for the forgotten ones. That's what he called us." "And what did he do?" Linda asked, her voice soft but urgent. The boy beside her, maybe 7 or 8 years old, swallowed hard. "He took Max. Said he was going to a new home. But Max never came back." Linda's chest tightened. "Did you tell anyone?" Maya asked, her voice trembling. "We tried," the girl said. "But the grown-ups always said we made it up, that we were dreaming." "But I wasn't dreaming," David said firmly. I remember his eyes, like smoke. And he said he'd come back for me." Maya backed away slightly, taking out her phone. Linda turned to Ellie. "Is there any record of a Max?" Ellie moved like she was in a trance. "There are a few files. That weren't fully transferred when I took over. I didn't think. I didn't know." David turned to Linda. "That's why I wanted to come back. He's coming again." Linda knelt down, feeling a strange sense of dread pressing on her chest. "David, did he say when?" David nodded once. "Tonight." Silence fell over the room, thick and cold. Maya had started dialing numbers, likely to the State Child Welfare Board. Ellie rushed into the back room to dig through dusty cabinets, and Linda stayed with the children, because if This man was real, and he was coming tonight, then they weren't going to be alone. Not again. Where does he come from, sweetheart? Linda asked David quietly. The trees, David said. Always from the trees. Linda stood slowly and walked to the window. Beyond the foster home, the dense woods stretched like a mouthful of shadows. And just for a moment, she thought she saw movement between the trunks too fast to catch. Too dark to explain, she closed the curtain. Then we stay together, she said firmly. No one leaves this room tonight. The other kids nodded, even Ellie, returning with a weathered manila folder in her hands. She dropped it on the table. Max Brody, 9 years old. Discharged, no adoption paperwork, no forwarding address. Face was pale. This can't be coincidence. Do you think he's a ghost? The girl with the pigtails whispered. Linda looked at the children and felt something heavy in her chest. Not fear, not quite, but something ancestral, protective. A rage so old and deep it was almost maternal. No, she said. Ghosts don't come to take. Ghosts don't wait in trees. The wind howled outside again, louder now, slamming a loose shutter against the house. David whispered, he's close. Linda crossed to the fireplace and grabbed the old iron poker. I don't know what he is, she said, her voice calm. But he won't touch a single one of you tonight. Outside, a branch cracked, and somewhere deep in the woods, something laughed. The old house creaked beneath their feet, groaning with secrets and sorrow. Linda stood with David by her side, the 3 other children clutching onto her coat as they waited at the front door. Outside, the night air was thick and heavy, but in a way that felt oddly hopeful, like the first breath before sunrise. Inside, the air had shifted. The fear wasn't gone, but it had changed. Now it carried a quiet courage. Linda could feel it, humming in her chest. You ready? She asked them. David nodded. We're not going back, right? No, baby, she whispered. No one's taking you back. They moved down the porch steps together. Linda's heart pounded with every footfall. A minivan she'd borrowed from her neighbor idled by the curb. The plan was risk-probably even illegal, but when the system fails, good people have to stand. In the cracks just before she opened the car door, David paused. What is it, sweetheart? He turned his eyes to the house, that quiet haunted house that had hidden too much darkness. They'll come looking. I know, she said, brushing his hair, but this time we'll be ready. It started 2 days later. Linda filed a report with the local paper, then called Child Services anonymously, giving them names, dates, and addresses she'd found in the house's hidden files. She mailed copies to a lawyer friend in Atlanta who had a reputation for breaking open hidden scandals. The silence didn't last long. By the end of the week, the Pinebrook foster home was all over the news. For arrests, 12 children removed, 2 officers suspended, an entire department under investigation. It turned out that David and his little friends weren't the only ones suffering. There had been a whole network had shuffled from one caregiver to another, each one profiting off stipends and silencing the truth. Linda watched the news quietly in her kitchen, her hands wrapped around a chipped mug of tea. David sat at the table, now sharing breakfast with the other kids, like a little family. Pancakes, syrup, peanut butter, whatever they wanted. Her home wasn't big, but it was safe. I want to go to school, said the girl with pigtail. Her name was Anna, and she had the boldest heart of them all. You will, Linda promised. And karate, added the smallest one, James, the one who had nightmares but now clung to her apron like a lifeline. All of it, Linda smiled. You'll get all of it. The weeks blurred into months. Linda worked double shifts at the diner. The town started whispering less and supporting more. A local church donated bunk beds. Her neighbor helped with rides, and that lawyer friend. He started the paperwork to get Linda certified as a foster parent. One morning, just before sunrise, Linda sat on the porch alone. The sky was turning soft pink over Pinebrook. She could hear the kids stirring inside Lauder. Footsteps, life. The diner would open soon, but for this moment, she was still. A soft hand slid into hers. David, he looked older, no more awake. The shadows under his eyes had faded. He didn't flinch at sudden noises anymore. You okay? She asked. He nodded. Do you think I can stay here forever? She pulled him into her arms and pressed a kiss to his forehead. Yes, baby. Forever and ever, if you'll let me. And so, in the sleepy town of Pinebrook, where one quiet boy once sat alone in a booth, everything changed. Not with a bang or a parody, but with a woman who paid attention. A woman who asked questions. A woman who refused to let one more child fall through the cracks. And that's how the story ends, not with a fairy tale, but with something far stronger. A family, built not by blood, but by courage. A waitress with a tired smile and an iron heart. And a boy who found his voice, not through shouting, but by finally being heard. The end. Smile she'd seen.